The most advanced ship in the world is nothing but a floating coffin when the engines die in the dark. In 1873, the freezing, violent waters of the North Atlantic swallowed over 500 souls, not because of an unpredictable rogue wave or an unavoidable act of nature. This tragedy was calculated on a spreadsheet. What you are about to witness is the first billion-dollar stain on the infamous White Star Line, decades before the Titanic. A terrifying maritime nightmare where a simple corporate refusal to pay for extra coal left a luxury ocean liner completely defenseless in a brutal storm. This is the dark history of the SS Atlantic and the lethal cost of corporate greed on the high seas. Long before the sinking of the Titanic, the White Star Line was already building an empire of floating palaces. The SS Atlantic was the absolute crown jewel of the fleet. She was a marvel of Victorian engineering, designed to carry wealthy elites and hopeful immigrants across the ocean in unprecedented luxury. But behind the velvet curtains and gas-lit chandeliers, the company executives were obsessed with maximizing their profit margins. To carry more paying cargo across the Atlantic, the boardroom made a highly calculated, dangerously cheap decision. They deliberately loaded the ship with the absolute bare minimum of coal required for the journey, leaving zero margin of error for bad weather. The captain and the crew knew the risks of crossing the treacherous North Atlantic in early spring, but the corporate mandate was clear: save space, save coal, and maximize the profit. They sent a ship filled with nearly 1,000 people into the unpredictable ocean, completely confident that their financial shortcut wouldn't catch up with them. But the ocean does not respect corporate budgets. Midway through the journey, a relentless, brutal storm battered the SS Atlantic for days. Fighting the massive waves burned through the ship's meager fuel supply at a terrifying rate. The impossible nightmare became reality. The mighty engines began to starve. Panic set in on the bridge as the gauges dropped to zero. The captain, realizing the fatal error, made a desperate decision to divert the ship to Halifax, Nova Scotia, hoping to buy emergency coal. But without power, the massive luxury liner was reduced to a helpless piece of iron adrift in the dark, churning sea. On the freezing, pitch-black night of April 1st, 1873, the ocean claimed its prize. The helpless ship was violently thrown against the razor-sharp underwater rocks off the coast of Halifax. The impact was catastrophic. The steel hull was shredded like paper. Freezing, violent waves immediately flooded the lower decks, trapping hundreds of sleeping passengers in the dark as the ship aggressively rolled onto her side. When the morning fog finally lifted, the scale of the corporate disaster was undeniable. The shattered remains of the once majestic SS Atlantic lay battered against the cold rocks. Over 500 people were dead, marking the worst maritime disaster the world had ever seen up to that point. The financial and reputational devastation for the White Star Line was absolute. The company was dragged into brutal government inquiries, facing fierce public outrage and crippling lawsuits. The investigation exposed the deadly truth to the world. The ship hadn't been defeated by the storm. She had been defeated by a spreadsheet. The disaster forced international changes in maritime safety regulations, proving that skipping on basic fuel reserves was a deadly gamble. Today, the rusted remnants of the SS Atlantic remain buried in the dark, freezing waters, a silent, haunting monument to the undeniable truth that corporate arrogance and cheap shortcuts will always sink to the bottom.